Hey guys, good morning. Happy Tuesday. A few fun stories to talk about today with you for SmartHER News, including this story that I thought was really interesting. Do you know the TV host Deborah Norville? She hosts Inside Edition. She's been working on television for a long time, has an amazing career. She just announced that she's actually having surgery on what apparently is thyroid cancer, a cancerous lump on her thyroid. And what's interesting about this is that a viewer alerted her several years ago to a discrepancy on her neck, and that although initially it wasn't dangerous, doctors now say that there's cancerous cells, and she's getting that thyroid nodule removed. And it just caught my attention because I do love HGTV, and of course there was an HGTV host, Tarek. Remember Tarek and Christina, Flip or Flop? He was super young and was diagnosed with thyroid cancer because a viewer saw something on his neck that looked irregular to her and alerted him, and he ended up going to the doctors and he was diagnosed. So potentially like life-saving flags from strangers. So it's just a reminder today, that if you're thinking or maybe or not you should speak up, maybe it's good to speak up. So that caught my attention today, kind of an interesting story. Thyroid cancer, I was taking a look at it. Diagnosis rates are higher because in recent years because the technology is better, but the survivability is higher as well compared to other cancers. So just sort of like a personal interest story that caught my attention. Today in history is an interesting day. It's the day that the first woman was ever sworn into Congress, Jeanette Rankin from Montana. She was, do I have that right, Montana? I'm going to have to double check my brain this morning. I've been up a little too early these days. She's a Republican, I do know that, and she's a suffragist and fighting for women's rights to vote. She was also a pacifist. So it's interesting to look at how, the parties are defined now, Republican versus Democrat. But she was a Republican representative, and when she was welcomed into Congress on this day, apparently the applause were so loud that she had to stand up several times. She was sworn into Congress a couple years before the constitutional amendment guaranteeing women the right to vote. So kind of an interesting fact there as well. As we take a look at some politics, I have to tell you, I was really on the fence about including any sort of coverage about what's happening in the 2020 race. I'm trying to be very calm about it because we're away from it. But the news site, and I also am very hesitant about including allegations when it comes to inappropriate conduct when they're non-actionable. What I mean by that is, anyone, anytime can make an allegation about you. I think it becomes news when it becomes actionable. So there's a lawsuit or there's a real life effect of this. But I did feel like it was worth noting some of these allegations of inappropriate behavior against Joe Biden, former vice president, as he apparently seems closer to announcing his potential race for the White House. So what I think is important to note about these, there's two women that have come forward that said that they didn't like the way that he behaved or touched them during campaign events. One woman said that he kissed her in the back of the head. The other woman said that he kind of grabbed her face and rubbed noses with her, which I think sounds, I don't know, I'm having a hard time saying that with a straight face. But that was 10 years ago. Still, they said they didn't like this sort of inappropriate behavior, and they wanted to speak out about it now. Biden's camp's sort of blaming right-wing trolls on the internet for bringing these stories forward, but I think it's worth noting that these women are Democrats and, are choosing to step forward now. I'm seeing a few other different stories that are bubbling up around Vice President Biden as well, not worth mentioning at this point. But again, it just sort of seems like there's a momentum towards his potential announcement. And so here comes some different stories that are causing, some reason for question from different political circles. I was struggling with mentioning it just because why does it matter? I'm not sure it does matter yet. But because there were two allegations back to back, I felt like you should at least know that it's happening. And it's interesting coming from Democratic corners, or so it seems. So the big question for the Democratic Party going into 2020, and this is something about why it matters, is what is the platform? Who do they want representing this party in 2020? How do they see the Democrats, how do they see positioning themselves, racing against President Trump and the Republican Party, and how are both parties sort of identifying their platform and who's going to represent them, what they look like, what they sound like, all of those things. We're seeing both parties work towards that. So that's something you should know. Yesterday, when we got on, we were talking, I was delayed a little bit because there seemed to be some flight disruptions around America for a variety of different airlines and different airports. And I have to tell you, there's not a lot of information about that. Apparently, it was due to some sort of data software that helps planes determine their weight and balance, and there was an issue with it. And so that's why it affected multiple carriers. Don't know more than that. It seemed to be short-lived, didn't have widespread effects. But, when anything has the ability to affect multiple airlines and multiple airports, I think it's important that you know about it. And then finally, there's an interesting study that was released last week. You're going to see it today. It's a Dutch study that was taking a look at diagnosis. So if you took a big group of people and divided them into men and women and looked at the different diseases suffered by both genders, was there going to be any difference about when men and women were diagnosed? And the study found, yes, that in general, women were diagnosed for diseases much later than men. And the study didn't explain why. There's a few different working theories from different people that have read the study. Some say, well, this is gender bias. Women tend to show symptoms in different ways than men, but in general, we kind of use the male symptoms to define these different diseases for diagnosis. Others say, well, men don't go to the doctors as often as women. So when men don't go to the doctors as often as women, when they do show up, they actually have the onset of the disease. And so it's an easier diagnosis right away. Anyhow, check that out. Again, we don't know why, but it's just sort of an interesting thing to keep in mind. I talked to Dr. Daria, of course, our friend, who is the author of Mom Hacks, which is a great book. She's an ER doctor, but also a mom. And I sent her this study and I was like, Dr. Daria, what is the actionable advice here? Because, that's not great to think, wow, I'm going to be diagnosed so much later for cancer just because I'm a woman. And she said, well, let's just wait a second. These were all hospital patients. It wasn't like someone going into the doctors. Like if you went into the doctors with a problem, now we actually don't know about any sort of discrepancy regarding this study. But she also said it was more of a reason for us to get screened and to be proactive with our health. So that door slamming is my 4-year-old. Is everything okay?
No.
Oh. Do you want to talk about it?
No.
Okay.
Liberty Liberty didn't listen to me when I was saying liberty. And she didn't hear me, and then she went outside here, and I had to keep the door closed.
Yeah, sounds...
Then I put my back on the door.
Okay. Wow, this all sounds totally normal and probable by your sister. Okay. I'm going to go handle that. So a couple things just to watch today. New study that I thought was really interesting about gender discrepancies and disease diagnosis. It's a day in history where the first woman was sworn into Congress several years before the constitutional amendment passed that women could vote. Now women make up about 25% of Congress, but she was the very first one, and she was a Republican, a suffragist, and a pacifist. So check out the card on her today because she has a really interesting story. And just another kind of reminder about how strangers can help each other, as Deborah Norville tells us that she's actually getting surgery for a cancerous node on her thyroid because a viewer alerted her to it many years earlier. Any other stories you're interested in, let us know. And thanks as always for your support of SmartHER News. Have a great day, guys.